Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with another donation reward reaction for Sweet Venom, and this time it is The Help. So I used to actually have a book about this, and I don't entirely know what happened to it. I might have gotten rid of it, I guess, because I couldn't seem to find it. Um, but I never read the book. I got it for free, and I just never ended up reading it. But this is a movie I have heard about, but I don't really know the full story. I guess I think it's about like racism or just in general servitude of people of color to white people. I don't know the specific details about like when it takes place or uh, anything specific behind it. But the only thing I know specifically is I believe this is the movie that has a specific scene in it that I've heard of that involves a pie. And I might be wrong. It might be a different movie. But if it is this movie, you might know what I'm talking about. Um, and if it is this movie, I'll let you know what it is when we get to that. But otherwise, I'll stay quiet for now in case anyone's watching with me. So this is about 2.5 hours long. So it's a pretty long film. But like I said, I don't really know much of anything else about it. Um, Obviously, we've covered movies that have discussed racism and slavery and stuff like that before. And as I've made very clear, or at least tried to make very clear, I'm obviously very anti-racism. Like, I'm not just not racist, I am very much anti-racist, which I feel like everybody should be, but unfortunately are not. Um, some people's reactions to the Black Lives Matter protests prove that. And by the way, I am very much BLM. I am very much a believer and a supporter of that. Even if it doesn't affect me, it doesn't matter. It affects people I care about. It affects friends. It affects people I even consider as close as family. It matters. And I'm not going to get into all of that here, but you get the idea. The point is, obviously, whenever I've seen this kind of stuff in movies, it bothers me. Even if it's like, oh, I know it's a product of the times that this movie takes place in, or I know that this is like, oh, this is what the movie is about, even. I guess a great example would be Django Unchained. Like, obviously, that's what the movie's about. Django Unchained is about a slave who is trying to rescue his wife from a plantation owner with the help of a German friend of his. And it's obviously got that Tarantino style to it, but it's also very heavy with a lot of the imagery, with a lot of the terms being used, the racist terms. There's a word for that, and it's completely escaping my mind right now. Slurs. The slurs being used, and so much more. It's like, it's very visceral in how it portrays that, and it should, mind you, because it's showing real life situations, real life pains, real life truths that happened. It doesn't sugarcoat it. It shows it for as bad and evil as it was. And I kind of appreciate when movies do that. When movies showcase this stuff in their entirety to make a point of how evil they are. It's the same thing with stuff like Schindler's List showcasing the horrors of the Nazi Party and everything. The same thing with movies that showcase horrors of sexism or queer phobia. These kinds of things need to be brought attention to because unfortunately, we can't progress without acknowledging the past. It's like, yeah, we would all love to just ignore it and pretend it never happened. But in the end, what good's that going to do? It's not going to help anything. It's not going to help anyone. In the end, all that's going to do is just, it's just going to ignore the problem rather than solve it. To solve a problem, you have to acknowledge a problem exists. And in the case of media, that means showing it. As hard as it may be. And as long as you show that that issue is wrong and is bad and is evil, then that's how you handle it. Like, if you make a movie showing Nazis or something and trying to like paint either a both sides kind of story or just saying like, oh, they were misunderstood or something like that, fuck you. If you do anything like that, fuck you. But I don't think that's what this film is going to go for, and that's not what a lot of the ones I've seen go for. You watch Inglourious Basterds, oh yeah, the Nazis are actually full-blown evil. And you want to see them get their comeuppance. You watch Django Unchained, the plantation owners are fucking evil, and you want to see them get their comeuppance. And so it's like, I think this movie is going to express that. Now, with this film, I don't know, like, I believe this is a drama, but I don't know, like, how heavy it's going to go into things. Obviously not Tarantino level. But if it does cover topics of racial servitude and stuff, it will probably get pretty heavy, pretty emotional. And you guys know I'm a big fucking baby. I cry very easily. And I make no apologies for that. If I get emotional for whatever reason to the point where I'm going to cry, I'm going to cry. I'm not going to hide it. So, I'm hoping that whatever the case, this movie is good. Especially since it's 2.5 hours. And that includes with the pacing. I don't know who's in this, by the way. Like, I don't know, like, who is in this at all, but I think the movie was made by, I want to say Oprah, actually. Or at least that she had a hand in making it. I think I heard that. But yeah, this movie is one I definitely expect to get me upset at points. I definitely expect it to get me emotional at points. I'm going into that expecting it because I do at least know something about this film. It's not one of those movies I'm going into completely blind on. But yeah, hopefully I still end up enjoying this as a film, and we'll just kind of see. But we should probably get this going since it is so long. Either way, and I will let you know ahead of time that the lighting is obviously going to change just because of the time it gets dark here now. So the lighting will definitely be changing during the course of this. Hopefully it just doesn't get too dark. That's my only hope. Either way, let's just get this going. Let's stop dragging this on. So when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black, then it fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the movie. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So there's a couple reasons I'm mixed on this movie. As I said at the end of the reaction, I'm coming out of this with a very mixed viewpoint. The message and idea of the film is good. The acting is great. I mean, you have some fantastic actors in here. The pacing is actually really good. I thought the 2.5 hours would be a little slow, but the pacing actually worked. Here's my biggest issue here. And I looked this up in between, and apparently this is a common issue slash complaint about this film, even by actresses who were in it, including Viola Davis herself. The way this is presented, the way this is told, even the people who made this and everything, both the original book and the movie adaptation here, this movie is trying to tell the story, the narratives, the struggles of Black people. It's trying to tell that through the lens of white people. And it is very obvious watching this. Because look at this one fact. The main character is a white girl. And yeah, she's a nice white girl. She's an anti-racist white girl, and she helps them. But does this not perpetuate the white savior narrative? Does this not try to say, like, these Black women's lives became better because a white woman came in and spoke up for them and got their words published and all? Is that not problematic to anyone else? And again, the message, the idea, all well and good. But the execution of this, not so much. And I don't know if this is how it was in the book, but even if it was, they could have changed shit. They could have updated it to make it, be more from the perspective of the Black characters. Abilene and Minnie are two probably the most leading Black characters in this, and it should have been from their perspective. And again, even just the fact that on top of that, again, the story in general is still about a white woman basically saving them. A white woman has to stick up for them, has to speak up for them, has to give them the courage to be able to tell their stories. And in the end, she's the one telling their stories for them. And as I said, I looked up some things here. Let me bring this up. And this seems to be a very popular, for lack of a better term, viewpoint on this film. And according to this, actually, from what I'm reading now, there was a notable difference in regards to this. In the original novel, Pascagoula, I might be mispronouncing that, and I really apologize if I am, but the Phelan family's maid is the one watching the Medgar Evers address, introducing her into the narrative. Whereas in the film, Skeeter is at the forefront, placing her as the primary audience of civil rights news. As I continue reading, this aspect of the narrative has brought forth some criticism toward the film. In an interview with the New York Times, Viola Davis mentioned that she regretted playing the role of Abilene, saying, "I just felt that at the end of the day, it wasn't the voices of the maids that were heard." Film historian Alison Graham writes about this in her article, "We Ain't Doing Civil Rights," commenting that the confusion of fictional and historical events begin to operate under a different narrative license. In criticizing the film, Valerie Smith claims in Black Women's Memories and The Help that the trivialization of systemic racism during the 1960s in the film makes the plot more accessible to contemporary readers and viewers. And I think that's what it was trying to do. I think that explains it exactly. This is an attempt to make this kind of story more accessible to white people. Whether the author's intent was good or not, this is clearly an attempt to make it so that as big of an audience can read this as possible. And I get that. You want to have this get out there. You want to have the message of this get out there. But when you choose to do that through filtering the story through a white lens, it takes away from the point, from the message. It's, for lack of a better way for me to put it right now that I can think of at least, it's basically whitewashing these black women's struggles. And it's not okay. Continuing on with more information about Viola Davis's words here. She feels like she betrayed myself and my people, and that the film was created in the filter and the cesspool of systemic racism. Bryce Dallas Howard, who was, oh God, what was her name? Let me scroll up real quick. Hilly, the quote-unquote villain of the film. Bryce Dallas Howard also has mentioned that she would not agree to star in this film today, acknowledging that it was told through the perspective of a white character and was created by predominantly white storytellers. And it's just, it's like people probably looked at this movie, saw that the fact that there was these nominations for Oscars and stuff. There were winners for Oscars. And they looked at it like, oh, this must be a really great film. It's like, this must be like, it's well directed, well written, well told, well acted. And they don't look at the issues in line. They just look at the things that were, in their eyes, done well, and ignore the clear problems that this kind of thing, like, creates. Telling this through the perspective and filters of whiteness, it invalidates kind of the point, the idea. And one notable issue, I guess I could say, is while yes, there were people in those times, there were white people in those times who were a lot nicer and who were on the side of people of color during the civil rights movement, I think that they should not have been the forefront. And honestly, maybe there shouldn't have been as many of them, because it felt like it tried to balance it out in a way to try and say like, oh, but there were so many white people who were nice. And it's like, okay, maybe so, but it kind of dilutes the message when you have so many characters who are just genuinely good people. It's like there's really only one villain in this, even Hilly. Like, there's other white people who like kind of just follow her lead. Like, even at the end, Elizabeth, like, she clearly didn't want to let Aibileen go. She clearly was upset about it. She didn't believe that Aibileen had done anything. She was just following Hilly. She was refusing to speak out for herself. It's very clear that it's like Hilly was the problem here. But why was Hilly really the only problem? And you could say like, oh, but what about God, what is his name? I have to figure out his name. Da, 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 da. Stewart. What about Stewart? And what about his reaction and everything after the book came out and all? It's like, okay, yeah, but Stewart was such a it's insanely minor character that he barely mattered. Honestly, what was the point of him? What did he add to the story? It just seems like there was so like little that actually like too many of them were there needed to be more. How do I word it? I'm terrible at wording shit. There needed to be more than just Hilly giving problems here. There needed to be more. What is the word? There's a word for it, and I can't think of it. Um, Issues, more problems, more bad guys. There's a word, and I'm completely blanking on it. There needed to be more. It sounds weird to say, but there needed to be more negativity in the film to properly represent how this era was. It was very watered down, and it just feels like it was not as well handled as it could have been. And according to this, apparently the critical response was pretty damn positive. And let's look at some of these to see what other people said. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus, as I say, always take that with a grain of salt, reads, though arguably guilty of glossing over its racial themes. Oh, wow, it actually mentions it. That's surprising. The Help rises on the strength of its cast, particularly Viola Davis, whose performance is powerful enough to carry the film on its own. So basically, they're saying, also arguably guilty of glossing over its racial themes. There's nothing arguable about it in my eyes. They're basically saying that Viola Davis and the performances of the cast alone make up for the shortcomings of the film. No, I'm sorry. And I think Viola Davis would agree based on her statements of regret for, being in the film and all. Tom Long from the Detroit News remarked, appealing, entertaining, touching, and perhaps even a bit healing. The Help is an old-fashioned grand yarn of a film, the sort we rarely get these days. A more mixed review from Karina Longworth of The Village Voice said, we get a fairly typical Hollywood flattening of history with powerful villains and disenfranchised heroes. Rick Groen of the Globe and Mail said, typically this sort of film is an earnest tearjerker with moments of levity. Instead, what we have here is a raucous rib tickler with occasional pauses for little dramatic relief. Referring to the film as a big old slab of honey-glazed hookum, the New York Times noted that save for Miss Davis's, however, the performances are almost all overly broad, sometimes excruciatingly so, characterized by loud laughs, bugging eyes, and pumping limbs. I think the performances were fine. That wasn't the issue. Da, 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 da. Okay, here we go. Ida E. Jones, the national director of the Association of Black Women Historians, released an open statement criticizing the film, stating, despite efforts to market the book and the film as a progressive story of triumph over racial injustice, the help distorts, ignores, and trivializes the experiences of black domestic workers. The ABWH accused both the book and the film of insensitive portrayals of African American vernacular, a nearly uniform depiction of black men as cruel or absent. Yeah, for the most part that did seem to be true. Like it was mostly centered around black women, and most of the black men you hear about in the film are just either absent or, you know, cruel, with like maybe one exception being the guy in the diner. And a failure to acknowledge the sexual harassment many black women endured in their white employers' homes. Very true. Jones concluded the Association of Black Women Historians finds it unacceptable for either this book or this film to strip black women's lives of historical accuracy for the sake of entertainment. Roxanne Gay of literary web magazine The Rumpus argues that the film might be offensive to African Americans, saying the film uses racial Hollywood tropes like the magical Negro character. In 2014, the movie was one of several discussed by Kelly Goff in the Daily Beast in an article concerning white savior narratives in film. So it seems like it's very well known that this movie just didn't handle that well at all. And a lot of people are even noting how it's really kind of a bad portrayal and a dangerous and harmful portrayal that strips historical accuracy away and ruins the point. Again, the message is fine, but if it's portrayed in a way that hurts it, what's the point? What does it actually accomplish? And I'm sorry I haven't actually talked about really anything in the film during these afterthoughts. I've been talking for almost 20 minutes just on my general main thoughts on the film and how that connects to what I've looked up afterwards to see that other people apparently feel the same. It's not okay to do things this way. It's not okay to portray this kind of narrative in this way. And apparently the book was like this too. Like I said, I used to have the book. I don't know what happened to it, but I guess I'm kind of glad I don't have it anymore. I never read it. And I got it for free, so at least I didn't spend any money on it. There's that. But yeah, it's like this movie, it could have changed so much too. It didn't have to be an entirely accurate book or film to the book. They could have changed a lot for the narrative. And instead, it seems like some of the stuff they changed, such as putting Skeeter more front and center in certain things, actually made it worse. What they should have done is taken Skeeter into a smaller role and made the main characters of the film be Aibileen and Minnie, and have it told from their perspective, and not have Skeeter be the one just completely saving them and, you know, being the hero of the story. They should have made changes. They should have made big changes to this. Because as it is, this just, it was not good. It was not. The performances may be good. The direction for the film as it is may be well directed. The pacing may be good. But the issues are so egregious that none of that stuff can make up for that. And I'm speaking as a white person. To make that very clear, obvious. I don't need to explain that. I'm very clearly white. But I'm speaking as a white person. I I can only say what I feel here. I can only say my view on the film. I can only tell you what I thought. And I definitely cannot and would not even try to tell you about what is right and wrong with the the historical stuff in regards to the lived experiences of black women. I can't speak to that. I'm not black. I can only share what I thought of it and share the voices of others and what they thought of it. And apparently, it's, again, other black women themselves seem to hold that kind of view. But again, Viola Davis herself, one of the stars of this film, regrets having been in it because of how it was portrayed. That's the kind of voice we need to be listening to. I'm just someone who reacted to this movie because it was suggested to me. Don't take my word for any of this. I can only share my opinions, my views on a film that I saw. I cannot go any further than that. So, again, I'm sorry if a lot of these afterthoughts didn't really talk about much of the events of the film or the specifics of what happened in it, but I think what's more important here is how this was delivered and how mishandled this was. This is what needs to be talked about in these afterthoughts. And again, as I said at the beginning of these afterthoughts, that I was mixed on this. But after reading accounts from black women who have found this to be offensive, who have found this to be regressive, it's like the positives I found with this, I acknowledge do not matter. And I don't feel mixed on this anymore. Because none of those positives, none of the acting or whatnot matters when the message being told is causing this much regression in how we need to be handling this. And this movie came out in 2011, I think it said. I could check to be sure. Ah, goodness. 2011, yes. This is not acceptable for 2011. It's obviously over 10 years later now, but this was not acceptable in 2011. Yet, this is how things have often been done. Get the widest audience possible by making it more palatable to everyone. And by doing that, you miss the point. So that's why I'm not giving my thoughts on anything else in this, because it doesn't matter. If you want more in-depth thoughts, find a black person. Find their review. Hear what they have to say, because their voice is the ones that matter here. Their voices are the ones that count, not mine. I'm just going to end up just repeating the same stuff over and over again, so we might as well end these afterthoughts. That's really all I have to say on this. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.